See how this episode is sponsored by TikTok for Business? Very mindful. Using their measurement solutions reveal the true impact and performance of your ads. See? Very demure. Learn more about better measurement on TikTok at tiktok.com/business.
We're in this moment where the B2B buyer is getting younger. Sometimes it's the same person who's scrolling through TikTok looking for lipstick who's then at least part of the decision-making process for a B2B brand. So those companies need to learn to speak their language, and who better to work with than a creator?
This is a special edition episode of Behind the Numbers, made possible by TikTok. eMarketer Principal Analyst Jasmine Enberg sits down with Yahoo Finance Senior Reporter Alexandra Canal to discuss the creator economy. This episode was recorded during the Creator Era, how creators are redefining media, marketing and commerce panel at the 2024 NAB show in New York. We hope you enjoy it.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Alexandra Canal, I'm a senior reporter at Yahoo Finance, and I'm very excited to be talking about the creator economy with Jasmine Enberg. And Jasmine, do you just want to tell the crowd a little bit what you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Enberg. I am a vice president and principal analyst at eMarketer, and I lead our coverage of social media and the creator economy.
All right, well, let's dive into that creator economy. And I want to start pretty broad. What is a creator, and can it even be defined at this point?
It's such a great question. There is no standard definition of a creator. At eMarketer, we define a creator as a person or an entity who develops digital content for digital platforms with the purpose of building, maintaining, and monetizing that content and the audience. It's used often interchangeably with the word influencer, but influencer, of course, has a bit of a negative connotation these days. I don't think that's necessarily fair, and I've been advocating for justice for the word influencer. And there certainly is some overlap between the two, but an influencer, at least in the way that we define it at eMarketer, is anybody who has the ability to sway the purchasing decisions or loyalty of a broader population. So if you think about creators that are working with brands to promote or endorse products, they're also, in that sense, influencers.
So how's the importance of this creator role changed over the years, especially from a brand perspective?
So I've been calling 2024 the year of legitimacy for the creator economy and for influencer marketing. It is long overdue, but I feel like we're finally in this moment where every CMO, every marketer really understands that they need to be working with creators. And there's a lot of reasons for this. A lot of those reasons are external. So if you think back to some of the big events that have happened over the past 6 months or so, Cannes Lions, for example, having a dedicated creator track. You have the Creator Economy Conference in Washington, D.C. You have YouTube beating out Netflix in terms of watch time. And all of these things have served to really make marketers realize that this is a space that we need to be working in. I will say, though, that not every CMO, not every brand is rushing towards creators and influencers with open arms. There's still quite a bit of hesitancy. I hear some reluctancy and a true lack of understanding in terms of how they build an effective creator and influencer strategy. But even this mindset shift of, we have to be working with creators and influencers is a huge step in the right direction.
So what's the root of some of the reluctancies, as you put it, for these brands to partner with these types of work with creators?
Yeah, so it depends on the brand, but historically speaking, one of the big hesitations for brands has been quote unquote brand safety, or the risk of something going wrong, or a creator saying something that will ultimately have a negative impact on the brand. That's still true, especially for brands that are in highly regulated industries, if you think about healthcare, financial services. But I think for the most part, marketers now do understand that creators, for the most part, also do not want to make a mistake. This is the way that they earn a living. And if you do your research and vet these creators beforehand, the likelihood of that happening is much lower than we might imagine. I think the hesitation today primarily comes from the difficulties or the seeming difficulties in measuring the impact of creator activations and influencer marketing overall when you compare it to other forms of digital marketing. The CMO needs a easy, strong story to tell to the CFO to be able to continue to invest in a certain marketing tactic. And it's not always that easy to prove the ROI of the influencer campaign.
Why? Why can it, especially in this day of age, we talk a lot about artificial intelligence, technological advances. How can we not prove that this campaign or whatever this influencer is doing is bringing returns to the company?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons why, and it all depends on what you're using or what you're working with creators for, what objectives you're trying to attain, right? But because a lot of the content that is created by creators is sponsored content, it may not have the same kind of metrics as a digital ad. Then you can then go straight to the CFO and say, hey, look, this is the direct return on investment that we got from this. Also, the path to purchase isn't linear, right? And so we know that influencers and creators play a crucial role in getting a customer to eventually convert, but it doesn't necessarily happen immediately. And so, I mean, I'm sure there are times that you've seen a creator post about a brand or a product, and later you've been, I don't know, say at Sephora or something, and seen that product and then purchased it. I mean, I know I have. How do you track that? It is very, very difficult to measure. And we are in this performance marketing era where, you know, marketers really are expected to show that return on investment easily.
So you mentioned sponsored posts, brand deals, and when I think of an influencer creator, that's immediately what comes to mind. Is that still the primary way that creators are making their income?
For the most part, yes. So every individual creator's income breakdown will look somewhat different. It depends on the number of followers they have, what platforms they're active on, what industry they're operating in. But if you look at the creator economy as a whole, brand deals are the number one revenue stream. So at eMarketer, we just released a forecast looking at all of the different ways in which creators and influencers are earning revenue on social media, and brand deals account for about 60% of that. You've got things like platform payouts, which is, ad revenue sharing programs from platforms like YouTube, for example, that account for another about 20%. And then there's a myriad of other revenue streams. But yes, I would say that brand deals overall are the number one revenue stream for most creators.
How about creators going direct to consumer and asking for tips, essentially? We're in this tipping culture. Has that gained traction recently?
Yes, it is one of the fastest growing revenue streams for creators, but you also have to remember that these are really small sums, right? For the most part, many of the platforms in which you can tip a creator do have a cap, a maximum in terms of how much you can tip at a time, which is usually around something like $50. And so you have to have a lot of people actually tipping in order to make real income off of that. But there's other direct-to-consumer tactics that are growing as well, things like subscriptions and merchandising, where you have people buying products and services directly from creators, and those are also among the fastest-growing revenue streams within the creator economy.
Going back to how you say 2024 is the year that this economy has been more legit, what opportunities does that bring outside of what we typically think of a creator? I mean, I think of Mr. Beast and signing with Amazon Prime Video, reported $100 million deal. Are there more opportunities like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as the creator economy becomes more legitimate and legitimized, and marketers, people start to understand the power of creators, the more opportunities there will be. I think the Mr. Beast deal is a fantastic example of that. But we're also seeing other creators launch their own businesses, their own brands, their own products. I was just at VidCon a couple of months ago, and there was a group of 7-figure creators on stage talking about how they think of themselves now as CEOs and not creators, because they have, or also creators, but primarily CEOs, because they have these businesses and, are making real money off of them. I think when it comes to how brands perceive that, they need to really be taking these creators seriously, right? Because we have a limited amount of money to spend as a consumer. And if I'm buying Mr. Beast Feastables chocolate, I may not be buying another chocolate brand. And so one of the things I always say to brands is, if you're not partnering with creators today, they could become your competitors tomorrow.
And what about the trickle effect that we could see with actual industries? I mean, Mr. Beast could be changing how we think about Hollywood, even the political arena. As we've gotten closer to the election, I've seen more and more political influencers. Yahoo Finance, we're partnering with several financial influencers to launch new podcasts. So we're now in an era where it's not just affecting the brands, but also actual industries, right?
Absolutely. And the evolution of political marketing towards creators has been incredibly fascinating for me to watch. And it's something that I've been following really closely. You really do have political campaigns now reaching out directly to creators because they've understood the power that they have in driving a message and having that resonate with communities that they need to reach in a way that traditional media cannot. Creators are also incredibly diverse, right? And so they have this ability to reach more diverse subsets of those communities, again, that may not be paying attention to traditional and national news. I do think it can be a little tricky sometimes and can get a little problematic. I mean, there is, a difference between having a creator or an influencer speak out organically about a political or social issue and a difference in between having a political campaign actually sponsor them to do so. And we see that in the research. And so we're in this moment, too, where consumers expect creators to speak out about these things, but they may not necessarily want that to be tied to a specific political candidate, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And it also reminds me of the tension that exists, I think, sometimes between what brands want their creators to say versus the creative freedom for an influencer to kind of speak to what they want to say. Do you think that's contributed to some sort of creator burnout out there?
Yes, well, so creative freedom is probably the scariest word that brands can hear when it comes to creator activations. I do think a lot of brands have started to realize that they need to give creators a little bit more quote-unquote control. Again, I think because creators have become more legitimized and treat this as a career and it's the way that they earn money, they're not, again, trying to write a script or create a video that is somehow going to hurt the brand. So we have seen some brands start to kind of loosen their or give up a little bit more of the control there. But yeah.
So let's talk about the different levels and tiers of influencers and sort of what separates the top earners from everybody else. And what's the most common? Where do most people fall into?
Sure. So to your point, the creator economy has become so big now that it becomes really difficult to talk about it as a whole. So you have this top echelon of creators who really are led by Mr. Beast. And their experiences are the ones that we tend to hear about in the media all the time. And they deserve that airtime for everything they're doing in terms of changing media, marketing, and commerce. But their experiences are also very, very different from the long tail of creators, many of whom are struggling to earn a living. There's been some great pieces out recently about this that really speak to the struggles of some of the smaller creators in scoring brand deals, et cetera, and finding ways to make money off of that. I think one of the things that separates them is community and audience building. I was actually just having breakfast this morning talking about Mr. Bean and how he has such a strong community that he says, go out there and fix any shelves that look a little messy that are selling Feastables. His audience will actually go and do that. And so it really comes down to that community, that audience they're able to build. And a lot of that comes through content and personality shining through.
And when you assess the supply and demand picture, you were just speaking to how diverse the creator economy is. And compared to 10 years ago, there's probably so many more creators. Does that mean that there's more of a limit to what you can make doing this?
It's a great question, and yes and no, right? So we are now expecting influencer marketing spending in the U.S. to get close to $10 billion. I think it's about $8.5 billion this year and $10 billion by 2025 or 2026, excuse me. So there is a lot of money flowing into influencer marketing. But we're seeing marketers really start to play at the two extremes. So they're partnering with these very big name stars who charge very high prices and generally do omni-channel campaigns, which are more expensive and require more resources. Or they're partnering with the smaller nano micro influencers, and they're partnering with many of them, right? So while they may charge lower prices, it ends up being more expensive because you have to work with many different micro and nano influencers to achieve the results that you're looking for. And like you said, there's a lot more creators out there than ever before, and it leaves this wide middle class of creators, and those are the ones who are really struggling to score brand deals at this point. They have built enough of an audience where they're not going to settle for, say, an affiliate marketing deal, but they don't have that community or that reach that some of the marketers are looking for when they're partnering with bigger creators. And there's just so much competition among that subset. I do think it's a mistake, though, if brands are not working with the middle set of creators, because it is a way for them to make their products and brands seem more relatable than, say, one of the top creators, many of whom are now akin to Hollywood celebrities, and less transactional than some of the smaller affiliate creators, for example.
How would you define that middle market creator and then those nano micro influencers?
So generally, they're defined by their number of followers. Again, there's no standard definition, but anywhere usually between 100,000 followers plus is considered a mega or macro influencer. And micro nano influencers, depending on which source you ask, can be anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000, maybe even up to 20,000.
Interesting. Now, as the Yahoo Finance girly in me, I have to ask, the economy, we're in a solid spot, but there is concerns that unemployment will tick up, that the U.S. will enter a recession. To me, marketing budgets are the first to go, right, if we enter a downturn. Is that a concern at all? And are you seeing that trickle through into what these maybe more smaller influencers are being offered?
Yeah, it certainly is a concern. Historically speaking, though, we have seen influencer marketing be more resilient than social ad spending, for example. So if you think back to the social ad spending slump in 2022, 2023, when, growth dipped to about 5% per our estimates during that time, influencer marketing spending continued to grow by double digits. And again, a lot of this has to do not only with the community and the connection and the easy way for brands to be able to connect with audiences on social media through creators, but because they tend to provide a less expensive way for them to, develop creative that can then be repurposed across many different channels. And that's something that we've really seen grow over the past couple of years.
Is it too strong to say it's recession-proof, or?
I wouldn't use the word recession-proof. I don't know if anything is really recession-proof, but it certainly has been recession-resilient.
Okay, I like that. And when we talk about some of these financial pressures, are most creators, are they doing it as a side hustle, a second job, or is it their primary income? And do brands care either way?
I think for most creators, they want it to be their primary job. As they're starting out, for many of them, it is a side hustle, a side gig. And for, a lot of affiliate creators, for example, it's a way of earning extra income. We do see quite a few creators now who have made it into a sustainable long-term career. And I think that that's the end goal for most of them. To the question of whether brands care or not, I think, again, it depends on the brand and it depends what they're looking for out of the relationship with a creator. If they're, looking to work with, a wide variety of affiliate creators to sell products, it may not matter as much. But if you want somebody to be a brand ambassador who's recognizable as the face of your brand, you may want somebody who certainly not only takes this seriously, but is professional and has made this their career path.
And I know every brand is unique. You were just talking about the follower count. Is that the primary thing that brands are looking for? Just the more followers, the better?
It shouldn't be.
So it should be.
I would hope not. Yeah. Those, vanity metrics like follower count have long been the way that brands have measured or, identified creators. I think there is still some of that, but we have shifted. So we have seen brands and marketers become much more sophisticated in their strategies. I think influencer identification overall is still a very difficult challenge for a lot of brands. But the one thing that I always recommend is to start with the audience, not with the creator. Look at where your audience as a brand is spending their time. Who are they engaging with? What are they interested in? And then find creators who can speak to that, because that will make it a much more organic, natural partnership.
So is there a magic number of sorts, or no? Is it sort of totally dependent on what you said, looking at your audience and looking at the engagement?
It's a question I get all the time. That one, and is there a magic formula for virality? And the answer to both of those, for me at least, is no. Yeah. I think, again, it depends on your campaign objectives. If you're looking for wide reach brand awareness, then yes, you're probably going to want to partner with a big name star who has millions of followers. But a lot of times it's those nano micro influencers who speak to niche communities who have a stronger ability to be able to drive sales, for example, also maybe more willing to accept an affiliate marketing deal. So again, there is no magic number. It really should start with your audience and your campaign goals.
Is there a way to filter out the bots of it all so you know that numbers aren't inflated? Is that a big issue?
It is a big issue. I think one of the things that AI is going to help with influencer marketing is exactly that, both vetting to make sure that follower counts are accurate and vetting to make sure that the influencer is right for a specific brand.
You mentioned AI, so I'm going to jump there because there was an interesting article. Mark Zuckerberg, he gave an interview with The Verge where he said creators and publishers, quote, overestimate the value of their work for training AI and that he would walk away if certain content creators demanded payments. What do you make of those comments?
He would say that. Not all creator work is created equal, but it would be remiss to say that creators and influencers have not played an enormous role in the growth of time spent on social media, the number of social media users, as well as in social ad spending. So next year, we are expecting social video ad spending, excluding YouTube, to actually surpass linear TV ad spending. And a lot of that has to do with the halo effect of creators and influencers being on these platforms, developing content that people are engaging with. And without them, the platforms wouldn't have as much content, as much interesting content as they do today. I think the platforms need creators just as much, if not more, than the creators in platforms now.
And in the creative community, AI can sometimes be a very scary word, and we talk a lot about the downside risks. But are there upsides to this as well, and things that creators can use to their advantage?
Absolutely. I mean, I think many of the applications of AI that we think about in business apply to creators as well, whether it's things like time savings, for example. I think one of the big advancements that has come out of creator-focused AI tools is dubbing or translations, help them reach wider audiences. I think, there is a lot of fear and hesitation over whether AI will replace them or replace creators still. I don't think that's going to be the case in the long term. There's always going to be a place for human creativity, even as we're seeing AI avatars start to arise. I do think, though, that it will help the cream of the crop rise to the top. Sorry, yes. And there will be a premium on some of this more engaging, better content.
And when we talk about more engaging, better content, is there platform preferences? Would you rather your creators be famous on TikTok as opposed to Instagram? How does YouTube play into it, especially with longer form content? Where are brands really looking at that?
Well, Instagram tends to be where most brands start in terms of their influencer marketing campaigns. It makes sense. I mean, Instagram is a huge platform for creators, influencers, also has a massive audience that tends to be very much in line with the type of audience that is attuned to creator and influencer content, meaning millennials, Gen Z. But again, it really should be about the audience, not the creator and not the platform, right? So brands, when they're looking to partner with creators, should look and see where their audience is. And if it's YouTube, then, YouTube should be a channel that they're looking into. And if it's TikTok, then TikTok. However, I always say to brands and creators to never put all of their eggs into one basket, right? Most creators are active on multiple platforms, and campaigns should also be multi-platform at this point.
Mm-hmm. We've gotten so used to short clips, I feel like, within social media. But then you see something like YouTube where, as mentioned, it's taken over overall TV time. What are you seeing in terms of the trends there when it comes to the type of content that's working?
Yeah, so people love short form video, right? And I don't think that is necessarily going to change. But one of the big shifts we've seen in the social media space overall over the past year is this, I wouldn't say reversal, but move towards longer form content, even on TikTok, which now allows videos up to 30 minutes long. And I don't know if you watched Risa Tisa, for example, posting 10-minute long videos. There's certainly a lot more longer content happening on social platforms, and people are really paying attention to it. I think one of the things that's really working on the creator front is more episodic content. Risa Tisa is a great example. I think it was like 45 10-minute long videos about her, terrible ex-husband that, people really consumed heavily and then talked about across social media. So I think it's a combination. I think it all boils down to the content at the end of the day. And the content should determine not only, the length of the videos, but also which platform you're posting them.
So the storytelling aspect of it all seems to be very important.
And creators are master storytellers. That's one of the reasons that they've risen to become so important to brands.
You mentioned TikTok. Obviously, a big risk is a potential TikTok ban. One, do you expect this to happen? And two, if it does happen, who would be most affected here?
I don't think I'm going to predict how TikTok will be banned. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
Who will be most affected if we do see a ban?
In terms of creator?
Yes.
So it's going to look a little different depending on who the creator is. Bigger creators who are active on multiple platforms, who have multiple revenue streams, are going to be just fine. Smaller creators who are TikTok only or TikTok first are going to struggle. There is no question about that. I do think, now is the time for creators to diversify their platforms and their revenue streams if they haven't done so already, because this is a very extreme case, but there are always external factors that can impact how they make a living when they're working on social platforms, whether it's algorithmic changes or the potential of regulation or a ban, like we're seeing in the case of TikTok. So to your question of who's going to be the most impacted, it really, it's going to be the smaller creators while bigger creators will be.
And how are brands looking at the potential risk of that as well? Are they partnering less with those?
No.
And they're still going all in on TikTok?
I have not seen a marked shift in how brands approach TikTok, either for advertising or for influencer marketing. I mean, for many of them, it's still a very wait and see moment. None of us know what is going to happen come January. And as long as there are people to reach on TikTok, over 100 million monthly users, according to our estimates, there is no reason for brands to leave. And creators won't leave as long as there's money to be made.
And what about the other social media companies? What could happen there? And if we do see a ban, do you think we will have a new company that becomes the new TikTok? Or do you think the market share will just shift to an Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, etc.?
So Meta is the most obvious beneficiary of a TikTok ban because of Instagram Reels in particular. And we've seen it make a lot of moves to port TikTok creators. It made changes to its algorithm recently to make it easier for smaller creators, many of whom are, may have larger audiences on TikTok or don't actually post on Instagram at all, to be discovered on the platform. YouTube is another platform that certainly will benefit, and it's also been courting TikTok creators through Shorts. We also saw Shorts just expand to 3-minute long videos. I do think there's certainly potential for a new platform to arise. It's not easy to break through as a new social app, and you think about all the ones that have tried over the past couple of years, whether that's on Lemonade, Be Real. They had their moment in the sun and then fizzled. Really, it's been TikTok over the past, 5-6 years that has really been able to break through and has had real staying power. So yes, I mean, there's potential for a new one to arise, but much of that engagement and advertising spending will be directed toward existing players like Meta and YouTube.
Remember Vine? Bring back Vine. I was obsessed with Vine.
I do remember Vine.
I'm glad.
Aging us, though.
I know. And I'm glad that now they totally got rid of all those. They deleted the platform because my Vines were not that good. Just saying.
But the early TikTok.
Yes, that's true. It was.
I know. It was too early for its time.
Yeah. And we're talking about all these different platforms. It feels overwhelming if I'm a creator, if I want to go pursue this, how I market myself correctly or where I even start. So what would be your advice there?
As a creator?
Yeah.
To find a niche. I do think there is still a place for broader lifestyle creators, but it's much easier in this moment where you have the platform saturated with creator content, with creators, with brands, with sponsored content, to break through if you have found a niche. And it needs to be a niche that is authentic and, although I hate saying that word, authentic and relatable to who you are as a person. And that has, we have seen that shift again over, the past year or so with the rise of more niche creators and that really being the way to go to market today.
And as a creator, how do you advocate for yourself when you're partnering with these brands to make sure that you're sort of putting yourself in a position to succeed and that it's a win-win for both sides?
Well, it can be incredibly difficult. I mean, most creators are creatives, not business people at heart. I think there's a big learning curve for them when it comes to getting to the negotiating table and making sure they're advocating for themselves. I think as brands have become more sophisticated, more data-driven, creators need to do the same. And really come armed to these conversations with historical data, with examples of their work, really to be able to prove their worth and their value to brands.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a little briefly about creator burnout. What can you do as a brand to make sure that your creators are kind of pumping out consistently strong content, that they're not teetering out, that they're bringing their own voice to these things? Because sometimes I feel like across the board, they all start to sound the same. And I feel like that can't break through the messaging that what you need it to be.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that will help creators and help brands is developing long-term relationships that are more sustainable and more accountable. If a creator knows that they are going to be doing multiple activations with one brand, it will certainly help with this idea of creator burnout, right? Because part of that comes from not knowing where your next paycheck is going to come from. On the brand side of things, it's also helpful to have a creator who has formed a sort of loyalty to the brand, wants to see it succeed, feels accountable to the work that they're doing, and that will really help improve those activations. It also helps for more communication, more discussion. I think that's where a lot of these campaigns fall flat, is you have a brand coming in and basically trying to force product marketing into a creator video. Of course, brands have a message that they want to get across, and creators need to understand that too. But in order to make sure that it comes across in a way that resonates with the community, with the audience, there needs to be a conversation between the brand and the creator who are working on it and make sure they're on the same page up front. There are so many times I've heard stories about, for example, a creator putting together a video for a brand, sending it to them thinking that it's in line with the brief, and having the brand come back and say, no, that's not what we wanted. Then they have to go back to the drawing table. And that too can contribute to creator burnout. And it's frustrating for both parties. So for me, it all comes down to consistent, clear communication and doing that upfront.
When we talk about the different subsets of influencers, the micro, the nano influencers, are there different niches that are doing very well right now?
So a couple of niches or industries that I've been following really closely, and you mentioned one of them, financial influencers. That has been a big trend. Again, over the past couple of months, we have seen a lot more financial services brands start to lean into creators and influencers. Another niche is healthcare. There's a lot of risks, of course, involved with both financial services and healthcare, and there's a lot more sort of work that needs to be done up front to ensure that, all of this is in line with rules and regulations within the industry. And a third is B2B, which I find absolutely fascinating and I think is going to become an even bigger trend next year. A lot of that is centered around LinkedIn, which makes sense because it's a professional social networking platform. But because of all of the sort of improvements that LinkedIn has made in their own creator program, the way that they have encouraged people to write more thought leadership on the platform, you really have seen this rise in the B2B influencer. And then you've got people like, for example, Lila, Corporate Natalie. Or I don't know if you watch that.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Right? Hilarious.
And I feel like they're kind of bridging the gap between B2B and B2C and kind of helping bring more awareness to this space, right? And so that is an area where I think we're going to see a lot more movement. And it makes sense. I mean, B2B marketing can be incredibly stale. And we're in this moment where the B2B buyer is getting younger. Sometimes it's the same person who's scrolling through TikTok looking for lipstick who's then at least part of the decision-making process for a B2B brand. So those companies need to learn to speak their language, and who better to work with than a creator?
Yeah. So B2B, you said LinkedIn. So is that people posting videos, kind of explaining their product and how they could outsource? Because it's interesting you bring that up, because someone I went to high school with is now a founder, and she posts constantly on LinkedIn videos, explainers, stories. And I've talked to her before, and she said that's because of the business that I get from that. So can you dig into that a little bit more? Because I think that is incredibly interesting and new, especially in this new world that we're living in. It's so technologically driven.
Yes. I mean, that is a great example of a B2B influencer, but there are certainly many other types of B2B influencers as well. It can be an industry expert, right? Who writes about things that are happening within the news that apply to a specific industry, for example. It can also be an employee at a company who is writing about it. I think one of the challenges, though, with B2B influencer goes back to this idea that many of them are tied to a specific company. So they may not be able to work, or will not be able to work, for example, with a competitor. And identifying those independent thought leaders who can speak authentically and with credibility, which is incredibly important in B2B, to your brand is going to still remain a big challenge. I also, while I'm very bullish on B2B influencer marketing, one of the things I always say is there's also a lot of hacks out there. Do you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn?
I do. To me, it's the new Facebook. I don't know. I'm not going on LinkedIn.
Like that, but
I know. Sorry.
I also spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. We have seen a huge uptick in engagement actually on LinkedIn.
You get personal updates of folks. They post their wedding on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, so-and-so got married. And I feel like it's exploded recently.
And it's those personal updates mixed with business news, with thought leadership, all of that keeps people coming back. But because of this, and because it's still such a new industry, I feel like it's still kind of the early days of B2C influencer. There's also a lot of hacks out there. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I like to compare them to BuzzFeed listables, where you have people who are quote-unquote thought leaders saying, here are the 9 things you need to know to grow your business. And so I think weeding out those people, and I'm not saying everybody who does that is a hack. There are some people who do that and do it very, very well. Weeding out those people and finding the real credible authorities to speak about a brand or a product is going to be the first step to making this really grow into it's a great point.
And when we think about the rise of financial influencers in the healthcare space, is that to cater more towards Gen Z? What's the main motivation there?
So we talk a lot about Gen Z when it comes to creators and influencers, and it makes sense. I mean, they're kind of the core audience for it, but it's not just Gen Z who are paying attention to them. When it comes to financial healthcare, a lot of that is for older generations. And we do also in the research see that surprising numbers of Gen Xers, for example, are following and are influenced by creators and influencers when it comes to their purchasing decisions. So I think as influencer creator marketing continues to expand beyond beauty, fashion, accessories, and all those things that we associate it with the most, it's also going to organically bring in new audiences.
Speaking of Gen Z, what percentage of Gen Z either is an influencer or wants to be an influencer?
So this is a crazy stat that came out from YouTube, and I think it was in June, that 65% of Gen Zers today consider themselves to be content creator.
Wow. Is the bar low there?
Mind blowing. Well, I mean, social media has democratized content creation, right? And so anybody can be a creator, which is a fantastic thing. But I think because of some of the stories that we've heard in the media, people tend to think that it's easy. It is not. It is a lot of hard work. And if you speak to a creator or an influencer who has, built a strong business, they have been at this for years. Yes, there are some viral sensations, but turning that virality into a successful, sustainable business is not easy. So it's incredible to see that you have so many Gen Zers consider themselves to be creators. I think it's true validation of the creator economy. but it's not an easy path forward. And there isn't really a roadmap for success.
Right.
If you think about other industries, you kind of know the steps that you need to take in order to quote unquote make it. That doesn't really exist for a creator or an influencer.
And it seems very cyclical too, because I think of Dixie D'Amelio, Addison Rae. I mean, they became famous just because they were doing TikTok dances essentially, and they went viral, got that following, and then all of a sudden they're these massive creators. So there's no recipe for success there. And when it comes to millennials and older generations, are they more hesitant to dip their toe into the creator world? Why are we seeing Gen Z resonate more with this?
Well, Gen Z is the first real digital generation, right? They kind of grew up on social media, so I think it comes much more naturally to them. I don't know, I'm a millennial. I'm the millennial pink generation with, picture perfect Instagram posts, and being an influencer was always this really sort of aspirational thing, right? You didn't think about creators or influencers as people like you. It's somebody who you may have aspired to be, or somebody who sometimes annoyed you, right? Everything had to be just so. When TikTok came along, that started to change, right? And we saw much more relatable, I wouldn't say lower quality, but lo-fi content, right? And it became much more easy for people to be able to participate in creating content for social platforms, and didn't feel as much that they needed to be so picture perfect online. I think there is still always going to be that pressure, but it's been lessened. And I think that too has kind of helped grow the number of people who consider themselves to be creators, because it's easier to do so than ever before.
Mm-hmm. And throughout this conversation, I've been thinking about The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I don't know if anyone watches that, but it's a show that really started because of TikTok, right? There was the Mom Talk. They started TikTok, and now they have a new show. Second season just got approved on Hulu. I mean, what does this say about what we as a society, what we're gravitating towards, and how that's being reflected in pop culture?
Yeah, I mean, I would say creators and influencers are a huge part of culture, and they set and make trends. They are, creating the entertainment that we're talking about, that we're sharing with our friends, that we're posting memes about. And some of that is now actually moving from social media into other channels. And, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is a great example. I've only seen 3 episodes, so
I finished it.
You did.
I did. It was very good.
It's very, very good.
Good binge watching.
It is good binge watching. I'm actually planning on watching it on a plane tomorrow.
There you go. Perfect plane watch.
We can talk about it after.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're seeing that in so many different instances. And if you think about sort of tentpole events too, like the Olympics or the Super Bowl, you're also seeing creators and influencers moving those to a degree that we hadn't really seen in the past, whether that's a Super Bowl ad or NBC sending creators to cover the Olympics in Paris earlier this year.
Yeah, that was a huge trend that I saw. And if we zoom out a bit, you talked about how 2024, this is the turning point. When we talk about the pandemic, how did that really accelerate and change the growth trajectory of this industry?
That's a great question. Marketers were starting to work with creators and influencers before the pandemic, but all of a sudden, marketing budgets were cut, production studios were shut down. Many of them realized that they needed to pivot. And so they pivoted towards creators and influencers who don't need more than a smartphone and who produce content, can do that very quickly and easily. And then you had the rise of TikTok at the same time, where we had this more lo-fi content really starting to resonate with consumers. And that stuck after the pandemic and has just continued to grow since then. And what we're seeing now, and I think we talked a little bit about this, is that it's not just sponsored content that brands are asking from creators. They are also repurposing a lot of that creative for their own social channels, also other digital channels, and even, bringing that into, digital out of home, for example.
So we're wrapping up here. We've obviously talked about so much when it comes to the creator economy, the impact to brands, the nitty gritty. What's the biggest takeaway that you want us all to sort of walk away from, or maybe ponder more of when we leave this room?
The biggest takeaway for me is that the creator economy is here and it's here to stay. Creators are incredibly powerful. I think there's still a lot of work to do to get the industry to take creators and influencers seriously. That is part of my job, in fact. But we do see that creators and influencers are really adept at not only helping brands and marketers reach new audiences, but drive real results. Whether that's sales or conversions. And so I guess, to wrap that up, it's tonight, creators are incredibly powerful.
There you go. We're here. Jasmine Emberg from eMarketer. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to this special edition episode of Behind the Numbers, made possible by TikTok. Join me on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily, where we will check in on how digital ad spending is getting on with analyst Ross Benish, happiest of weekends.